Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Jacques Devauges, who is following Christophe Roumier and Jean-Luc Lambrays last week in our Burgundy winemakers. Jacques, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Neil. Good afternoon, everybody.
We were just talking just now about the situation in Burgundy with the virus. How has it been for you with the 2020 growing season?
Yes, it was a big concern because when the virus came, we had to take special precautions. And I was very concerned about having the team at work to make sure to handle well the 2020 vintage. And I have to say we took it very seriously, the precautions to take, and it's working well. A vineyard is probably one of the safest place to work, because you are outside, you have one row every meter, so the social distances are written on the soil everywhere, and it's going pretty well. What is a little bit frustrating, it is that we had to cancel all the tours, all the tastings, all the visits we have usually, and we were just discussing about that before. It's a little bit frustrating because, of course, our job is to make wine, to produce wine, but as well to share it with our clients and to have the cellar with the barrel empty, with no visitors, with no tastings. It's a little bit sad. So I really hope it will be fixed as soon as possible and on the coming months, really.
Yeah. And you're speaking to us today from your office at the Domaine?
Yes, in Moët-Saint-Denis. Yes, this is my office.
And how has the weather been in so far in 2020?
It's every year it's a new story. It's a new movie. So this year it's a little bit crazy because March and April has been like summer, and May is the same. So as a consequence, the bud burst has been very early, 2 weeks in advance. And right now, I was working in the vineyard this morning, and the flowering is starting with good months of advance compared to a normal year. So it should be a very early picking vintage, probably end of August.
Oh, really?
Yes,
you're getting used to that now.
Yes.
Used to be like the if you were in September, that was good, but now it's in August. So
it's a little bit crazy, but wait and see, because we had vintages like that, like it was 07 or 11 with a very early start and very sunny spring. And after, in August, it turned to be fresh and wet sometimes.
Yeah.
And after, the maturity has been delayed. So we'll see. But it's clearly a very early spring.
Yeah.
And early start, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So I think what we'll do is I'm going to do the similar format I've done before, is that find out a little bit more about you, Jacques, your background and how you got this position at Domaine de Lambrays, and then we'll talk about the Domaine and the background, the history of the Domaine, and then about the vineyard and your winemaking philosophy, and then maybe at the end we can expand that, maybe talk about issues in Burgundy. As usual, if people watching this live can ask questions, so if you have any questions to ask Jacques, do let us know, but best let us know at the beginning of the of our conversation so that I can ask them. So just tell me a bit about your background, Jacques. Are you Burgundy born?
Yes, I'm born in Burgundy, in Dijon, in a family where we were drinking good wines at home.
What kind of wines are we talking? Romanée Conti every day? Or?
Not Romanée Conti, but I had the pleasure to discover the Chambertin from Rousseau at home, the Musigny and the Bonnemar from Vaugué. Not every day, but it was this kind of bottles and was on the family cellar.
That's quite a serious cellar to have those wines. Was your mother or father a wine connoisseur, or?
Yes, my father, and it was a time when people could easily afford this kind of bottles. It was 40 years ago, and yes, I had this chance. And after, finally, when I look at how all that happened for me, at 18, I had no plans. I had no idea what to do, what kind of job looking for. And like, many people of my age at 18, I've been in a domain to make the harvest. It was a small domain in Pomar. And
Can you say which one? Which domain?
yes, of course, it's Domaine Lejeune. I say hello to them. It's a very nice small domain with some Rugiens, and I remember Monsieur de Pomerol, the owner, driving back the grapes from Les Rugiens the last day of the harvest. He was so proud, so glad of his grapes. Then I said, "Wow, that's something. That's a nice job."
And his name was Monsieur de Pomerol.
Monsieur de Pomerol, Julien de Pomerol. Yes.
Like the Bordeaux appellation.
Yeah, but no relation at all. But it's this kind of image that I got from this experience. Then some people so proud and so passionate and so glad about what they were doing was a little bit frustrating because there were so many things that I didn't understood.
Like what? What kind of things?
First of all, for the harvester, we were not supposed to get into the winery. It was prohibited. We have to stay out of the winery. So after the day of picking itself, I was turning around and trying to look by the door and smelling the nice flavors. And I was living there, sleeping in the domain, in the family. And every night it was nice party and nice wines. So anyway, I had, I think, interest for wine from this experience. So since I had really no particular plans to start studies, I started to study wine. And the more I was studying wine, the more I was interested in. And this is how things happen for me. I ended up to study enology at Burgundy University. And voilà, this is how it happened for me.
Can you remember, were there any bottles that made a big impression on you when you were young or when you were older that made you?
Yeah, it's very clear in my head. It's I told you before, Les Musigny from Vauguet, vintage 72. And a Montrachet, I cannot remember the vintage, but the wine was very dark color, like apple juice, and the wine was so aromatic, so intense. Wow, when you drink that and you are 17, it's a shock, you take that, this amount of flavor and of energy and of power with the delicacy of the Montrachet. And yes, you remember it all your life. No? So,
did you drink those bottles at home or with your friends or at the Domaine?
With my family, but I have to say the best memories I have, I can say it now. It's a bottle I robbed from the cellar and drink with my girlfriend, which is my wife today.
You have to say that. And so how did you what was the first domain that you worked after your studies? What was the first job you had?
Just graduated. I knew I wanted to work in Burgundy, but I wanted to have experience from abroad. So I went to California in Napa Valley, and I worked there a year and a half in Napa. It was a great experience. I liked it very much.
Where did you work? Which wine estate?
It's a small domain that do not exist anymore called Chateau Potel Winery, which is located in Montvideo on the mountains near Oakville. Well, it was a great experience, but after a year and a half, I came back to Burgundy, and there it was 2001, and I started to work at Domaine de la Vougeraie with Pascal Marchand. It was the beginning of Domaine de la Vougeraie before Pierre Vincent.
Was that a big? Was that a big difference going from Napa Valley to Domaine de la Vougeraie?
Yes.
Was it a big change for you?
Yes, definitely. The mining, the way to think, the winemaking is totally different. I would say in Napa Valley, it's a very scientific approach. And in Burgundy and in Domaine de la Vougeraie, totally different. In Domaine de la Vougeraie, I discovered organic farming and biodynamic farming, thanks to Pascal Marchand and Bernard Zito. And it was for me a great experience because organic and biodynamic farming, it's too bad, but you don't learn about that at university. And to me, I think it was an important step on my career.
So that was the first time that you had learned and practiced organic and biodynamic.
Yes,
It was
yes,
biodynamic back then, wasn't it? Domaine de la Vougeraie?
Yes, they are still organic and biodynamic, of course.
Yeah.
Voilà, so after that, I changed to work. I wanted to see a little bit a wider scale, so I went to work with Frédéric Magnin in Moret-Saint-Denis. So it's a small négoce, but négoce and buy grapes. So it was wonderful because I had the opportunity to work many different appellations, much more than in a domain where usually you work always the same appellation. And we were focused in Côte de Nuit, from Marsanais north to Nuit Saint-Georges south, and all the range from the Bourgogne to the Grand Cru. So it was a very good experience for me. But I was a little bit frustrated because when you buy the grapes, you can never reach the perfections and you have if it's your own domain and you make the vines, you make the work in the vineyard. So this is why in 2011, I moved to Domaine de l'Arlot, which is located in Premo. And this is thanks to Christian Silly, the general manager of AXA Millésime. He trusted me and he gave me the key of the Domaine de l'Arlot and he said, go for it. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a great evolution because it was the first time I was responsible. I was in charge. I was the winemaker. And yes, it was very nice. And I think from this experience, I discovered and I learned about winemaking in whole bunches. Because before myself at Domaine de l'Arlot, it used to be Jean-Pierre de Smet and Olivier Le Riche, and both learned how to make wine with Jacques Cess of Domaine du Jacques in Moret-Saint-Denis. And they used to make their reds with many whole bunches. And I did not work with them directly. Tasting their wines, I discovered all what the whole bunches can bring to the Pinot Noir when it's well done.
Were you nervous about using whole bunches? Because it's interesting. When I was talking to Jean-Nicolas Maillot last week, he was very much, it's not my thing. It's not that he doesn't like the wines, but he's not.
This is what I was thinking myself arriving to Domaine de l'Arlot. I said, Vendange Entière, it's not for me. But really tasting those wines, the back vintages of Domaine de l'Arlot with the clients, I found in love for these wines. And finally, I think this is the heart of the thing. If personally you like the flavors and the influence of the whole bunches, you want to do it yourself. If you don't like it, you stay 100% distem, like the Henri Jaillet school. But myself, I think Vendange Entière bring a lot to Burgundy, especially from old vines. with Milrandage grapes, yes, it really give an extra diversity of perfumes.
Does it make the wine does it make your job more difficult using the stems?
Yes,
It's risky, doesn't it?
definitely, it's a little bit more risky. You cannot do it with any grapes. This is a subject, you talk about it with 15 winemakers, you will have 15 different answers, 15 different approach about it. Myself, I feel comfortable to use a whole bunches from old vines, not from young vines. If I have grapes from young vines, I destem 100%. But if I have some nice bunches of grapes with what we call milrandage, which is when you have the small berries mixed with normal size berries, this is very typical of Pinot Noir on the Grand Terroir, old vines. You have a lot of it, a lot of milrandage. To me, it really requests to be vinified with whole bunches because there it brings those floral character, tobacco notes, herbs, but herbs can be very pleasant, like fresh herbs and minty notes sometimes. And all the difficulty is to have these advantages without the disadvantages, which are the rustic and green tannins. So there is a way to proceed. And it's all what I am looking for when I'm doing whole bunches. And one thing I discover as well, tasting those old bottles from Domaine de l'Arlot, it is the wines vinified with whole bunches, clearly it gives to these wines extra potential of aging in bottle. And this is very interesting as well. It's from the tannins of the stems, of course.
It's actually my, people ask what was the Burgundy wine that made me interested in Burgundy, and it was actually 1990 from Domaine de l'Arlot, Nuit Saint-Georges. I can't remember which one, but it was at Ma Cuisine. And in the late 90s, it must have been 97, something like that. But that was a bottle that sort of, it was so beautiful. And I was wondering, like, in using stems, whole bunches, is it something that you learn by doing it? I mean, it's not something you can just read in a book to learn how to use stems. Is it something like you have to do a vintage, see the results, do it again, or like that? Or?
I think it's something you talk about with your colleagues and with your friends, but one day you have to jump and you must do it. And this is something at the same time very pleasant and very stressful in our job. We make wine once a year. So myself, I will make, I don't know, 35, 40 vintage, no more, not a lot. So every year you have to challenge yourself to try to adapt and try to discover new things and try to improve your approach. So with the whole bunches, you have no choice. One vintage, the grapes comes and you have to go for it. You have to put the damn grapes with the stem in the tank. And you say, wow, I'm crazy, it will be awful. And sometimes it is awful and sometimes it's beautiful.
Have you had a wine where you thought I would have used more stems, or I would have used less stems if I could go back?
Yes, of course, but I think that it's fair to say that I've made mistakes with Vendange Entière. I've made mistakes. I've made wines with too much tannins for me. Me, I knew it. I was showing this wine with the pipette from the barrel to the clients and everybody liked it very much. But me, I was not happy about the quality of the tannins. It was too green and I was saying to myself, this pigeage, this last pigeage that I've made, I should have not made it.
Which vintage was that, Jacques? Sorry.
2013. I will not tell you the appellation, but I will tell you the vintage.
I look at my tasting notes.
You will find it, I'm sure. Another danger with the Vendange Entière, it's what we call acetate, this kind of vinegar smells, and you can very easily catch especially at the beginning of the fermentation. So all those little details, you need to make the mistakes, and after you do better. It's the way it is.
Yeah, yeah. And so how many years were you at Domaine de la Lo for?
For 4 years. And after that, I was very lucky because I met Sylvain Pithiot, which is really a great man of Burgundy, not only for the wines he made at Clos de Tar, not only for the books he writes about Burgundy, which are in between the best, I believe, the best maps, but as a person. Sylvain Pithiot is very wonderful person. And Sylvain Pithiot asked me to come at Clos de Tar because he was going to take his retirement. And this is how I joined Clos de Tar. It was in January 2015.
Yeah. And was that a big change?
Yes. Yes and no. Yes, because of course Clos de Tar is Clos de Tar. It's a jewel of the Grand Crus of Côte de Nuit. But no, it was not such a big change because finally at Domaine de l'Arlot, I had the Clos des Forêts Saint-Georges you were talking about before. That was 7.2 hectares. Clos de Tar was 7.5. And inside the Clos des Forêts, when I came at l'Arlot, I made research on the soils to make different cuvées, to try to take the best of every different parts. And when I arrived at Clos de Tar, Sylvain Pithiot was working with this mining since years and years. So for me, it was easy to get in. And what I liked as well, joining Clos de Tar, it is that I could change a little bit the viticulture because we turned organic from 2015. And the year after, we start biodynamic as well. With certification on both Ecocer with organic and Biodivin for the biodynamic. And it's as a vigneron, you know, to start organic farming and biodynamic in a vineyard, it's fascinating. It's so interesting. So I liked it very much.
Do you believe in biodynamics, all the biodynamics, like everything, or do you?
You know what? Me, I discover, as I told you before, I discovered biodynamic from the vineyard. I never heard before about Rudolf Steiner and all those theories. So what interests me on those practices, it is and it's working. You can see, you can taste the effect of those practices. You can see it in the vineyard and you can taste into the wine. This is what interests me. To be honest with you, there are some steps today I don't understand, like dynamisation and all that. It's mysterious, but it's working and it's very interesting. I can see the results. It helped me to think. This philosophy helped me to be, I believe, more close to my vines, more close to the rhythm. And rhythm are so important in general, but specifically in agriculture and even more in viticulture. So I cannot imagine today to grow vine without biodynamic because it really helped me, I think, to have more clever and better vineyard management.
One of the other things, maybe you disagree, but I think you did change was maybe Sylvain was always picking his fruit quite late. Would I be correct in saying that you moved the picking date a little bit earlier than what he was picking?
Alors, you know what? Maybe yes, maybe no. You're right. I used to pick a little bit earlier than Sylvain, but finally, in a picking date decision, you have so many factors. And you have 2-3 days to pick on the right time according to the style of wine you want to make, then myself, I focus on my decision and I don't look at what the neighbors are doing. And it's true that finally, when I look back on my shoulders, I picked very early in Moret Saint-Denis, the vintages of Clos de Tard I was in charge of. But I didn't took this decision, you know, to be some of the first of the village to pick. It was really, I was focusing on my decision of harvest date. And once again, it's very sharp. You have 2-3 days before it's too early and after it's too late. Huh? So
yeah, yeah. And so you were at Clos de Tard for
4 years.
4 years. 4
yeah,
years.
From 15 to 18. And last year, in 2019, I was lucky enough to join the Domaine des Lambrays. And it's a great privilege for me. I'm so glad to be in charge of such a jewel, because the Domaine des Lambrays itself, by the vineyard, by the buildings, by the garden, by the history, is a true jewel of Burgundy. This is obvious.
What's the biggest differences going from Clos de Tard to Domaine des Lambrays? What's the biggest differences between the two?
You know what? I will answer you better in a couple of years, because I consider myself as a student. I have many things to learn about Clos des Lambrays. I had the chance to know intimately Clos de Tard for 4 years, and I will keep it for me all my life. It was a great experience. But voilà, to answer this question properly, I need time, and I will tell you more in a couple of years.
Yeah. So let's just have can you describe the Clos de Lambray for us? Because it's quite an interesting vineyard, isn't it?
Yes, it's a quite interesting vineyard. So first of all, it's 8.66 hectares.
Yeah. I think we've got a map just coming up maybe in a moment where we can see where
okay.
located. And here we go. There we go.
So yes, 8.66 hectares located in the middle of the village of Moret Saint-Denis. And south you have the Clos de Tard, and north you have the Clos Saint-Denis. The vineyard is in the slope, and generally speaking, it's east facing. But when you look at the landscape, imagine you are in Burgundy, walking in the vineyard of the Clos des Lambrays. You will realize that if generally speaking it's east facing, you have some undulations. It makes like waves. So from one side or another side of the undulation, you don't have exactly the same exposure, so not the same microclimate. And talking about the microclimate, on the top of it, in between the lowest point, which is by the village, and the highest point on the top of the slope, you have a difference of altitude of 60 meters, which is important. So once again, it's important for the different microclimates.
And it's not quite a monopole, is it? Clos de Tard is a monopole, so that's just one owner. And then the Clos de Lambray, I think there's just 2 owners, and there's a little part that's not owned by the domain.
Yes. So this is by our history. So very quick about the history. Clos des Lambrays used to be a monopole because it was owned by the Citeaux Abbey. We are talking about 1365. We have the writing trace of it. We have the document at the domain, and it's written Clos des Lambrays, and it was the property of the Citeaux Abbey, 1365. After, it has been sold at French Revolution, and it started to be divided and divided again. This is classical. This is the history of almost all the vineyard of Burgundy. But when the story starts to be original, it is from the middle of the 19th century. One person, Mr. Joly, had some vineyard inside the Clos des Lambrays, but some little plots. And his dream was to recreate the unity of the Clos des Lambrays. So he started to buy all the neighbors he could. And unfortunately, he could not succeed to restore the unity of the Clos des Lambrays. He sold to, it has been sold to another family called the Rodier, and they succeed. So beginning of the 20th century, in 1900, Clos des Lambrays was a monopoly. And Clos des Lambrays was a monopoly from 1900 until 1974, when the Topnomerme Domaine decided to plant at the end of their garden some vines. And the end of their garden was classified as Clos des Lambrays. So today you have two producers of Clos des Lambrays since 1974, the Domaine des Lambrays and the Domaine Topnomerme. But But what is funny, it's the way it is, we do own, the Domaine des Lambrays own 99.5% of the Clos des Lambrays, and the Domaine Topnomerme own less than 0.5%. And I mean, it's just the way it is, it's a history, and there is no problem about that, of course. I'm very friend with Virginie and Romain Topno. But voilà, that's the situation. In Burgundy, we talk in ouvre, you know, one ouvre is face measurement. 1 hectare make 24 ouvres. So we do own 202 ouvres, and Domaine Topnomerme own 1 ouvre. You see? Voilà. So this is part of the little stories about Burgundy. So you're right. Clos des Lambrays is not a monopoly because you have two producers.
Yeah.
But frankly, technically, we are almost a monopoly.
Yeah.
And this is what matters finally. So
I suppose one other difference is that it was actually a premier cru up until 1981. Is that, and then it got promotion?
Yes, you're right. And this is another aspect of our history. Our history is quite complex. This is a mystery. It's really a mystery of Burgundian history. And the question is how a terroir like Clos des Lambrays has been forgotten in 1938 when the classification has been made and all the Grand Cru of Burgundy has been classified at the same time as the Premier Cru and the villages. I say, how is it possible? Because when you look at, you know, the old books, the old record, the first precise book about classification is a book of Dr. Laval in 1855.
Yeah.
And on this book, Clos des Lambrays is classified as a première cuvée, like Les Bonnes Mares, like all the Grand Crus, you know. And after you have the book of Camille Rodier, same thing. The Clos de Tard is classified as all the other Grand Crus at the top of the hierarchy. So how is it possible then in 1938 they forgot to classify the Clos des Lambrays? But in fact, the reason is to look after the owner. The owner was very eccentric. She was a lady. She was Madame Cosson. And Madame Cosson was an artist. You know, she knew nothing about wine. And she did not just condescend to ask for the classification. So since the owner didn't ask to be classified as a Grand Cru, the Clos des Lambrays have not been classified. And this lasts until she passed away. And when the new owner bought the property in 1980, they asked for the classification of the Clos des Lambrays, and they got the classification a couple of months later. It was in April 1981. Right. This is the story. This is how it happened.
And then if we can just like look a little bit more closely at the actual vineyard. We're just going to bring up a little map. Hold on. Little map. You drew a nice map here. Here we go.
Okay.
And I think this is really interesting because we think of like Clos de Lambrays as one, one kind of vineyard, but actually it's like lots of different terroirs together. Can you just talk me through the different soil types as we go down the slope in the vineyard?
Absolutely. Alors, to make it simple, I would say what is special about the Clos des Lambrays, it is the level of diversity and complexity of the microclimates. We talk about it, but of the soils as well. So basically, regarding the soils, you have 4 different mother rocks. From bottom to top, you have calcaire entre-roc, after you have some marls, after you have calcaire marneux, and after you have calcaire de promo on the top.
So there's different types of limestone as you go down.
Absolutely. And on the top of those rocks, you have different kind of soils.
Where we go at the top, can you talk us through as we go through the top and work our way down?
Okay. So if you start from the top, surprisingly, this is where you have the more deep soil. You have 80 centimeter deep soil, and you are on the top of the calcaire de promo. And depending on where you are, if you are on the Clos de Tard side or on the Clos Saint-Denis side, you have either some rocks or some gravels.
Mm-hmm.
As you go down, you have more clear color soil with some sand. And when you are all the way down, where it's written cerisier, it's a very superficial soil, and you have like 20, 30 centimeter no more. The rock is like a huge plate, and it's a very sandy kind of soil.
Did there used to be cherry trees planted there? Is that where the name comes from? Or?
You know what? There is one, and today
still there today.
I can tell you they are very tasty because
they're Grand Crus.
Yes, they are Grand Crus.
Grand Cru cherry.
Absolutely. Last year we had a very small amount of sherry, but this year we have a lot of sherry. So I hope it's a good sign for the harvest. But anyway, you have to look at Clos des Lambrays as a mosaic with many different kind of mother rocks, soil types, microclimates. And to make it simple, you see you have maybe 3 or 4 main parts. You have the north part, which is along the Clos Saint-Denis, which is called La Plante, in the map. Yeah. At the opposite, the south part along the Clos de Tard, you have les 50 ouvrés.
The 50 ouvrés, yeah.
Yes, the 50 ouvrés. And yeah. in the middle, you have the 80 ouvrés. So these are the 3 main parts. And there is a little bit special down, which is called le cerisier, the cherry tree.
Yeah.
But this is reductive because it's much more complex than that. But me, I like to play with that. I like to take opportunity of this diversity to identify in the vineyard the different plots and to harvest them separately. Like that, I can vinify them separately, make special things for each. And the idea is to reveal the diversity of every different place. And it's fascinating to, first of all, to see the differences you may have. And another thing interesting is when you put all those cuvées together, it's like if all the qualities of each cuvée are added one to another. So 1 + 1 make 3, and it's really interesting to work this way.
Do the vines ripen at different times in the vineyard? And
no.
which vines? No.
And in fact, all the growing season don't go the same way everywhere. In fact, it's very easy to see it now. The flowering is starting. And when you are full flowering down on Le Cerisier, on the top of the Clos des Lambrays, the flowering is just starting, and you have 5-6 days of delay in between both. It's because of the 60 meters of altitude.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And and nowadays your approach in the vineyard is biodynamic or for the whole vineyard?
Now, you know what? You don't, this is my thinking. You don't change like that from classical viticulture to biodynamic. You must do the things right, and right is step by step. So for me, the first step was to turn organic.
Yeah.
That was last year in 2019, and it's already a big challenge technically, because you take risks regarding the disease and all that. And I wanted to make sure to make well the organic farming before to switch for biodynamic farming. And this is why this year, and only this year, we start biodynamic. And I'm very glad about that. You don't do it by yourself, you do it with the team. So you have to kind of convince the team that it's the right direction. And voila, we are working.
Is that easy to do? I mean, sometimes it can be more difficult.
You're right.
Isn't it? If you've got somebody who's been there 20, 30, 40 years and suddenly you say, oh, I want you to do it a different way, they can be a bit resistant.
Yes, this is why I send them back to school. One day, a conference about biodynamic and all that. And when they came back, they say, we understood nothing. I said, take it easy, no worries. We will do it step by step, and you will see it's not so crazy. And this is what we are working on right now with the team.
Do you think in the end you might look for certification, or it's not interesting for you to have that?
Yes, I know we are Domaine des Lambrays, we are quite exposed. And for me, if I talk about it, I have to be certified. I know certification is just paper, and I don't care about the paper, but at least if people ask me, are you controlled? Yes, I can show the paper with a stamp. So I asked for organic certification from last year with Ecocer. So we are today on the process of conversion to organic farming. This year, I didn't want to apply for biodynamic certification because it's too early. We have to organize ourselves. We have to do well things before to apply for biodynamic certification, because I would like to do it with Biodivin, which is a very good and nice group of people. And voilà, we have to work a little bit before to knock the door of Biodivin.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you decide on we spoke briefly earlier, like when do you decide to pick? Are you looking at the analysis, or are you just tasting the grapes, or how do you decide when to pick?
Alors, the decision of picking is coming from many factors. It depends on the botrytis you have or not. It depends on the forecast, and it depends on the maturity, of course. And the maturity, I play on I use all what I can to decide the right maturity, to find out the right maturity. Of course, I make analysis, so it's sugar, acid, pH, phenolics, and all that. I taste the fruits for the flavors, for the sweetness of the tannins. And after, there is something which is tough to explain, which is a certain feeling. You follow your vines and your grapes for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and you see the evolution they take. And with the forecast and with the style of wine you want to do, you decide your date. So it's never easy, it's never simple, but it's the way it's working for me.
And in terms of the winemaking, of course, Thierry Bruin made the wine for many years, and did a fantastic job in improving the Domaine since the 80s. Have you changed anything since you joined the Domaine from Thierry?
You're right to talk about Thierry Moin, and I should have talked about Thierry before, because when Thierry Moin joined the property in 1980, it was almost a ruin. Vineyard was in bad shape, and Thierry Moin, first of all, when he came, restored the vineyard, but not only, Thierry Moin restored the reputation of the domain. And as well, Thierry Moin has been a visionary, because in 1980, almost it was rare to have people that worked the wine with whole bunches. Everybody was running after the Henri Jaillet school, you know, big color, distem grapes, a lot of New York, and Thierry Moin, from the beginning, and he never moved, worked his wines with vendange entière, of whole bunches. So for all those reasons, I have to pay a tribute to Thierry. And this is clear, and I know that all what we can do today, it's thanks to the work of Thierry during the last 38 years. Alors, after for the, your question was for the winemaking?
Well, I wanted to know, like, since you joined Domaine de Lambrays, have you introduced anything new in terms of the winemaking?
Oh, okay.
Compared to before?
I think what is new is this approach very close to the different little plots we have inside the Clos des Lambrays. So for example, for my first vintage, I did not use the tank than we used to have, that was big tanks, but I bought plenty of little tanks to be able to ferment separately the different parts of the Clos des Lambrays. And this is probably the bigger change, because otherwise the Domaine des Lambrays remain a domain with wines fermented with wood bunches. And yes, that's quite a change to have this parcellaire approach.
Do you have to, it's actually quite a good question, just going back a little bit, William Lawson asked, he said, do you have to pick the grapes a little bit later to make sure that the stems are fully ripe, lignified? Is that something you think about?
You know what, frankly, I never pay attention to the maturity of the stem. This is just on the words, I don't get it. You know, a stem to me is never ripe. Try to take a stem of somebody's and tell you this is a ripe stem, and take it and put it, and it's awful. Huh? So me, I focus on the grapes, the flavors, the sweetness of the structure, the analysis, of course. And if the grapes come from old vines, if I have some milrandage, I'm sure the stems will be of enough quality to be fermented with the grapes. And I don't worry about maturity of the stem. I have enough trouble to find the right date for the maturity of the grapes, so I don't care about maturity of the stems itself.
And how much percentage of stems do you use in the Grand?
It's a decision which is made at the last time on the sorting table in the winery. But typically, I like very much to have in between 70 to 95% of stems, because I find out that if you have 30%, 35% of stems, you don't feel it a lot. I think those nice flavors of old roses, spices and all that, it comes when you are higher than 60-65% of whole bunches.
So this leads to another maybe quite difficult question, but somebody asked, so when you look at a wine that expresses the terroir, so let's say Clos, the Clos de Lambrays, then if you have, say, 70% stems that adds to the flavor, is that part of the terroir as well, or is there a danger that the stems will mask the terroir?
Yes, I
How
see
do you judge that?
But you know, finally, probably the answer is on the definition of the word terroir. What is a terroir? Terroir for wine is a landscape, a plot, a vineyard with a particular microclimate, with a particular grape variety, and with the intervention of the man, because without intervention of the man, first of all, you don't harvest, and if you harvest, you make a vinegar. So the man is part of the terroir expression.
I'm not going to debate this, Jacques, because we will be here for hours and hours discussing what is terroir.
No, but just maybe to give the right answer. I think no matter what kind of technique you are talking about, you know, whole bunches, cold soak maceration, or natural yeast, or whatever kind of technique, if you feel the technique into the wine, if you take your glass of wine and you say, oh yes, that's good, that's whole bunches, that's a shame. That's too bad, because we talk about Clos de Lambrays, we talk about Grand Cru, and our goal is to make wines that are as pure as possible and reveal the place they are coming from. So it's like the oak, it's like everything, all the technique things in the wine. But if it's integrated into the wine, it's fine. And this is what I'm trying to do.
How would you describe the style of Clos de Lambrays compared to Clos de la Roche or Clos de Tar? What makes Clos de Lambrays Clos de Lambrays?
Alors, I will not compare Clos de Lambrays to Clos de Tar. Or to, I would like to speak about the Clos de Lambrays by itself, you know, or compare to, in general, the Grand Crus in Burgundy. I think what is really special and characteristic of the Clos de Lambrays, it is first of all in the nose, this level of like different layers of perfumes. It's quite large. The aromatic profile is complex. And in the mouth, you take it, the wine is not massive. The wine is not impressive. It's not like a Chambertin, you know. It's quite elegant, refined, delicate, very long, and very, we say feminine character. I don't know if it's a good description, but it's this kind of very elegant wine. And sometimes when you taste it young, you may believe, it's so elegant and it's almost too elegant. You know, there is not enough matière and concentration. But after, when you have the chance to taste back vintages, it's remarkable. It's a wine, and this is as well a characteristic what makes Clos de Lambrays special. It is, and it's a wine that can age very well.
I always remember having a 1947, many years ago, in Switzerland. It was amazing, absolutely amazing.
You know, for myself, I have a personal memory. When I used to work at Domaine de la Vougeray, it was back in 2002. By some circumstances, I had the opportunity to taste a Clos de Lambrays 1918.
Wow! And how was that?
I have it in my head like if I had it this morning. The color was very pale. It was almost like a tea. It was orange, but not brown. The smell was so complex, so interesting. In the mouth, it was not a big wine, clearly. It was liquid, but it was a wine more in the spirit than in the body. It was just a great wine, really a great wine. And a couple of months ago, I had the Clos de Lambrays 1919, so 1 year after 18, and 1 century old. And it's fascinating because the wine was totally different. Clos de Lambrays 1919 was quite dark still, and with big volume in mouth, almost a young guy, you know, ready for a couple of other decades. Huh?
Yeah.
So Clos des Lambrays, to me, it's a mix of all that. This complexity, this diversity, this richness of the aromatic profile, this elegance, feminine character, this delicacy, and as well this ability to go through the decades and to age so well in bottle. And in the Domaine, we know it because we are lucky enough to have still on the cellar some Lambrays 18, 19, of the 20s, of the 30s, of the 40s. We don't have much, but we still have some bottles. And every time we open this kind of bottle, it's a true lesson for me, and I think for all the people that drink this wine.
Out of interest, the wines made in those years, like 1918, 1919, they would have included the stems 100%?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I was saying it's a lesson, for us, this kind of wine, I was thinking in between other things to that, of course.
Yeah, and it's a good question. I think I know the answer to this, Bertrand asked, but would you ever consider making a specific cuvée from one of the parcels in Clos de Lambrays?
That's a tough question. I think Clos de Lambrays will never be as good as when you put everything all together. And it's thinking to those old bottles and I had the chance to drink. Back then, they used to put just everything all together. And it's a lesson for us because sometimes we can have the temptation to say, yes, I will make selection, I will make different level of wines, and I will create top Clos des Lambrays. I think we have to be humble enough to know that the terroir is stronger than us. And if Clos des Lambrays has been delimited as it is, it's to have all the cuvées all together. The only exception I see, it's the young vines, of course. If you replant a part into the Clos des Lambrays, and if you have young vines, it's fair to put them apart and to bottle them as more recently Premier Cru.
So they go into the Le Loup, is it?
Absolutely, absolutely. But otherwise, if the vines are old enough, I think we have to be humble enough to say that's the truth of the terroir. Let's put all together on the proportion of what nature gives us. I think the truth of the terroir expression will be like that preserved. And I think this is what makes the interest of the Grand Burgundy wines.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, we're just about to run out of time, actually. It's gone very, very quickly. It's been fascinating talking to you. I sort of feel as if I know Clos de Lambrays much better now, even though I've been going there for many years. But Jacques, thank you very much for joining us and going into such detail on the vineyard and the winemaking. And I'll be looking out for some 1918, 1919 Clos de Lambrays when I go to the supermarket and feeling a bit thirsty. But Jacques, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for everything, and goodbye to everybody.
Thank you very much, Jacques. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.